This is the Dr. Duke Show.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Dr. Duke Show. I am Dr. Duke, and I am joined by Vicki McKenna. Vicki, how are you today?
Well, I'm good. I'm excited to discuss, filth midweek.
Yeah, it is unbelievable when you think about it. I mean, at some point, you run the risk of desensitizing people because it gets so bad so fast. I guess the takeaway we'll start with for me on this story is a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, public schools would pretend it's not happening and then kind of offer a mute apology for this kind of stuff in the schools. Now we're at the point where the public schools are simply saying, hey, tough noogies, this is the standards, this is what the DPI wants, this is what the feds want, so go talk to Joe Biden if you got a problem. Our story is about...
I was going to say, they're making parents have a knockdown, drag-out fight on every single book and every single issue and every single teacher and every single lesson. Because even if you win a fight, the school district is not willing to, remove all of the offensive material or take care of all of the offensive lessons. They make you fight every single issue, to bloody knuckles.
And if they do take a book away, what they replace it with is as bad or worse. And you think this is bad. Wait till parents find out in November that masks are back full force, and then see how they try to fight that, because that ain't going to work either, unfortunately. And so this particular story, Vicki, is Wisconsin School District. This is Kenosha, Wisconsin. Defends offering kids written guides to anal sex and sexuality kinks, claiming that the content passed the selection guidelines. I love that argument. So we have made porn.
How? I would like to know how. What are the selection guidelines?
Well, I was about to say, the selection guidelines now probably say that radical LGBTQ blah 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 blah. If
WTF?
Yes, that their sexuality. I think I sent you a story about this last week, where one school district is actually arguing. They're arguing that in New York, the entire state is arguing that to remove pornography when it's associated with gay sex is a human rights violation against LGBTQ people.
That's what they're claiming, that vile, deviant, BDSM, kink, other types of dangerous sexuality, that's a right. That's a human right. But you as a parent don't have a right to protect your child from exposure to these materials. Mind you, nobody still can walk into a convenience store and plunk down however much it is and walk out with a pornographic magazine without showing ID. You can't do that. But in the schools, the books we're talking about here are as bad in some cases. And as long as it's trans or gay or non-binary, it's totally fine that your 6-year-old has access to that material. And we're going to talk about a story in this segment that has libraries hiding materials that offend gay people and trans people and non-binary people. So totally fine to rub your 6-year-old's nose in filth. Not okay for your kid to check out Harry Potter.
Well, and the logical conclusion of what you just said, Vicki, and it's inevitable, is there will come a time in short order where graphic pornography bought over the counter for little kids is going to be okay. I mean, if you're teaching them in the schools, if you're providing them radical sexuality imagery and advice and giving them consent, well, then how can you withhold it from them? I mean, the idea that this will just stay in the schools is nonsense. And tell me the marketers of pornography aren't going to see that. If a fifth grader, a seventh grader is getting the equivalent of what our magazines or our website is doing, if you deny that 11-year-old access to Pornhub gay sites, well, then you're actually doing the same thing that moms and dads are. You are punishing kids for their sexuality.
Wisconsin DPI has materials available for teachers to use in comprehensive sex education that advise them. In fact, Planned Parenthood, you might have remembered that story not long ago, but advises children to check out pornographic websites. advises them. Now, mind you, we know what porn does to the brain. We know how it rewires the brain. It acts like a foreign substance. It acts like a drug or a toxin, and it can actually rewire brain chemistry. But you know what? Let's have the schools suggesting kids check out kink porn online. Mind you, again, you're supposed to show some kind of age verification, but you've got the schools telling kids to seek this stuff out. And let's not forget, we talked about this on a maybe it was the last show or the show before this, SECUS. This is an organization that is advising schools in Wisconsin. It's advising schools nationwide, California, Indiana, Iowa, and it's sex ed for social change. It's about promoting the idea that, heteronormative sexual attraction and sex itself is it's either oppressive or it's just too mundane to bother about. And it advocates for aggressive exposure of very young people to graphic sexual content. So, here we are in Kenosha. I'm not surprised. Nobody should be surprised at this point. But the message, the takeaway from this for all parents should be, you don't think it's in your kid's school? You're just wrong about that, because it's there.
Yeah, this was a tip that was sent to the invaluable libs of TikTok, and they did a deep dive. And you see this sort of stuff here. To whom it may concern, I am gathering information for a story about the pornographic books your school district, Kenosha district currently has available to students to view, use, and check out from your public school libraries. The following pornographic books are currently available in your schools. Flamer, which is unbelievably bad, available at 5 schools. Me and Earl and the Dying Girl, which is nasty, available at least 4 schools. Genderqueer, which we've talked about endlessly, is available in 2 schools. Let's Talk About It is also available in the district. We talked about that book. It's a how-to guide for radically dangerous sex. And then This Book is Gay, an ebook available online to anybody who wants to take it out, little kids included, from the district. The investigator says, for proper context, I have attached screenshots from the above-mentioned books. Here are the books that we're talking about here. They are radical in their filth. I can't think of another word for it.
Listen, I know that you're not showing the actual images from the book because it is shocking, but everybody needs to go look at the images in this book and understand that this is what 6-year-olds are exposed to. We're talking about graphic depictions of anal sex, graphic depictions of oral sex, graphic depictions of kink. They're either in cartoon form or in extremely detailed illustration form. And those are picture books. Every book you showed is a picture book. It's not just text. It's a picture book. And so, I understand why you don't want to offend people by showing them on this show, but your 6-year-olds are being exposed to images that are so vile that, they make adults uncomfortable to see. So everyone should go to their library, their kid's library, or any library. Check these out, march up to the librarian, open the book, plunk it down and say, you explain to me why this is okay for my 6 or 7-year-old, and watch them squirm. And if every parent did that, went to the school library, went to the regular city library, opened up those books and showed it to the librarian and then demanded that person explain, maybe they'd be removed. But if 50 parents did it or 100 parents did it, they'd be put behind the desk, behind the counter at that point. And it's got to take a concerted and sustained effort on behalf of activists to deal with this, because winning one little battle here or there is not going to be enough. They just move on to the next target.
Well, and I think you're right about the moment we live in, but I fear this is changing quickly. I really do believe now we're entering in a new era when you do up with a mom, you show up and you open that book and you point directly to the bad images with a librarian. I think we're reaching the point where they figured out no one's ever gotten fired. No one gets fired. No one gets reprimand. And if
it's
you
not,
do,
I agree with you. No one's going to get fired, but it's going to make them crawl out of their skin. And they don't want to look into the face of a grandmother and explain why a depicted 14-year-old boy inserting his penis where it has no business being is appropriate for a 6 or 7-year-old kid. That's what I'm talking about. Because I think you're right. No one's getting fired over this. It takes an act of God to get someone fired. But you can make their day suck by doing this regularly and forcing them to explain graphic pornography for children while you're sitting there tapping your foot saying, could you explain it, groomer?
Well, and basically the response of the Kenosha School District that we have it so far is this. Here's the response. Kenosha, KUSD, staff use selection and deselection guidelines to evaluate the library collection on a regular basis. At any point, they can deem titles no longer meet the needs. When did they ever, by the way, of school communities and process books accordingly? Parents, guardians who have concerns are encouraged to contact their child's school office for assistance and support. In other words, we and a bunch of other people approve these books. Now, maybe they're no longer useful. And do you believe for 1 second, no longer useful means that they're too pornographic or they're not pornographic enough? Which one would you bet they mean in their selection process?
I would bet no longer useful means not filthy enough.
Exactly.
Or something that doesn't actively promote alt sexuality. That's what I would say. And to your point, there was a selection guideline that exists that somehow managed to check the box on all these dirty books. So their selection guideline is like, graphic depictions of sexual behavior between children or children and adults. Absolutely. Let's put that one on the shelf. And incidentally, the shelf typically is at eye level for a child. So what they're saying is, first they're saying to the reporter who contacted them, get bent. That's the first thing they're saying by not answering any questions. Secondly, they admitted that there are selection criteria and a group of people at least signed off on all of these books. And then they admit that they're monitoring the problem when the reporter was inadvertently included on a reply by the superintendent. So we know that the library staff, that the superintendent, everybody's in on the joke here. And they think that by ignoring this reporter, they're going to be able to stave off any kind of confrontation on this. But a confrontation is brewing, and that will happen. And yet it will be yet again another fight that parents are required to battle and to go face off against 6'5" nightmare men dressed as women with fake boobs and clown makeup on, threatening to kill them while they're trying to just have rational behavior by teachers, librarians, and school administrators so their children and grandchildren aren't exposed to deviant filth in the classroom, especially when most of them can't read or write at grade level.
And that's why they're all cartoon books. They can't read. We're going to take a quick break. On the other side, we're going to get to the next really nasty story about how libraries are actually being told to hide any material that might offend trans kids. Welcome back with Vicki McKenna. And Vicki, this is the hypocrisy. And look, the word hypocrisy is meaningless. It used to be a great sin. It used to be something that would make you ashamed. But hypocrisy now is just considered politics. And here's the warped politics of this next story. We're told that we have to have all this radical pornography in the public libraries and public schools because trans and gay kids need it. That's who they are, number one. Number two, when you have other books in the library that criticize that we can't have. So in other words, get the porn in the nature of freedom and liberty, and the right to read all kinds of books. And then when you have books that question radical books, well, now we're going to hide and withhold those from library patrons. It
isn't even radical books that question LGBT WTF. It's just books either by authors that the trans activists don't like J.K. Rowling, Harry Potter, maybe the most popular book among young people ever, the whole series. It's taking books out that have traditional gender roles. It's taking books out that depict intact nuclear families or the value of intact nuclear families. But your very first thing you said was that we're being told that trans kids' human rights depend on the books that we were just talking about in that last segment. So I want everybody to think about this, that kids who are being determined to be trans by their psychotic parents are they're right, and it's necessary for them to be exposed to XXX rated material that would not even be acceptable in polite adult company or even impolite adult company. This is the kind of stuff you don't even see on the shelves. You've got to go, you need a crypto account to access it online. And they're saying these children have the right to be sexually abused, apparently. And Western society is just nodding okay with that, oh yes, children have a right to be groomed by sick adults who want to have sex with children. When did it happen that suddenly we all nodded our head and said that was okay?
Absolutely. We've got a graphic here that helps illustrate the situation. Librarians told to hide books by gender-critical authors. Guidance from a London, UK LGBTQ group called Book 28. It's all about welcoming LGBTQ users, and it urges and demands, actually, that libraries across the country hide and put out of sight books that feature critiques of LGBTQ and trans sexuality. It's unbelievable. Librarians telling us that we must have gay porn books for kids because not to have that is book burning, and libraries must have all books except book. It's like walking into your local Barnes and Noble where they've got 8,000 queer books for kids out there. You got to go all the way back and around the corner by the bathrooms and look very carefully to find books about traditional Christian morality now.
By the way, Duke, we should talk about the radical nature of librarians. People don't think about librarians as being radical, but librarians as a group are extremely anti-American, are extremely radical. Typically do view the entire, their entire existence through a Marxist or neo-Marxist lens. Will absolutely censor materials. I don't know if you recall back during 9/11, it was totally fine to keep the anarchist cookbook or to keep, how to build your own dirty bomb on the shelves and not to turn in anybody who went to the libraries to surf materials on how to, commit acts of terrorism, because civil liberties. And that has now morphed into take away access from people who want access to traditional materials, maybe even classic history, and replace it with revisionism and sexuality. And again, the librarians are now, they're heralding, instead of saying civil rights, they're saying human rights. But oddly, civil rights didn't include other people's civil rights, and human rights don't include anybody who is not LGBTWTF. So people need to understand the librarians, even though they look like, maybe kindly, mousy women, are among the more radical groups of people you're ever going to see on, at least for most people, a weekly basis.
Well, in the public schools, they look much more like purple-haired little lesbian women now. That's what happened. And two things. One, remember, people forget this. We warned about it. 13 years ago when Common Core hit the shelves and all the new Common Core books filtered into the schools, there were actual videos of librarians taking dozens and dozens of classic literature off the shelves, dumping them into garbage bags to remove them. And number two, let's not forget that the head librarian in charge of the American Library Association is a self-proclaimed, boasted, radical, lesbian, anarchist, communist. That's who she is. And she's made it her mission to turn libraries, particularly school libraries, into places of socialist LGBTQ revolution.
Yeah. that they see themselves as revolutionaries. Understand that the manipulation of access to information so as to promote a revolution against the structures, the Western structures, the Judeo-Christian underpinnings of Western civilization. Make no mistake, in thinking that the librarian is just a nice person. The librarian is a political activist. And we've let it happen. We've let the people who hate history, who hate truth, who hate beauty, who hate justice, who hate God, to determine what culture is going to look like. And they do it in ways every bit as significant as Hollywood or fashion or music does.
I'm almost tempted to ask my producer to put, every time you and I talk about the schools, a nonstop 25-minute flashing sign at the bottom of the image that says, "Get them out, get them out," right? Maybe the subliminal message will get through. And that's going to wrap up the show. If you enjoy these programs, please subscribe to our brand new podcast channel. Simply visit drdukeshow.com or search Dr. Duke Show on any of your favorite free platforms and leave us that 5-star review. For all of us at the Dr. Duke Show and for Vicki McKenna, thanks, and we'll see you next week.